All right, let's take the story now to Brussels. Our correspondent, Teri Schultz, is on the story for us this evening. Good evening to you, Teri. Talk to me about what NATO's role is in the pandemic. Has it become an arm of the European Union in a way?
Well, NATO is looking for its role in the crisis, Brent, knowing that it has resources to really play a positive and effective role. It is not exactly coordinating with the European Union, but it does have the chance to sort of outshine the EU. You know, on one side of Brussels, you've got ministers debating how much economic aid should be sent to the countries that are hardest hit, how much debt should be mutualized. On NATO's side, they've well, we've got these big planes and we could fly supplies around. So it's sort of a much easier decision to make when you're talking about just basic capacities with a lot of the politics shorn away. So NATO really does have the opportunity to shine here, and that's what it's done. It's got some shared capabilities in strategic airlift, for example, that countries can request and have requested, so they can buy some supplies, as for example Romania has done from South Korea, and get these big C-17s shipped in under NATO programs that they've already paid for, that they already contribute to. So it's a moment really where NATO could really step up, and that's what it says it's going to do now.
Well, there's a Russian component in the story. Europe has purchased Russian supplies for the pandemic crisis. There are these images of Russian medics in Italy at the moment. I mean, this does not look like a good PR moment for NATO at all.
Well, that might be better blamed on the European Union side, because it was the EU that Italy asked for help, and where it didn't show up. And then, of course, Italy was happy and couldn't really be blamed for taking the assistance that Russia offered. But NATO has since sent some shipments there. It's not NATO's own supplies, but it's countries. For example, the Czech Republic suddenly came up in its NATO capacity with a bunch of protective gear, 10,000 suits, both for Italy and Spain, and then sent them through a NATO plane. But you're right. I mean, NATO spends so much of its time and so much of its public relation effort to prove that it is that it can take care of its own member countries, that it can deter any Russian attacks. And then here you have two major NATO allies, Italy and now the United States, taking plane loads of supplies from Russia. So if you're sitting in the Kremlin, you've got a ready-made narrative to show that NATO can't take care of its allies, that NATO is not more powerful than Moscow. Yeah,
we were just looking at some pictures there of the Russian military in northern Italy that sprayed disinfecting buildings, propaganda video for Russia. I'm wondering, Teri, has a virus replaced Putin's Russia as the perceived biggest threat to NATO? I mean, or is the virus distracting NATO from the biggest threat, which is Russia?
Well, this is something everyone's very aware of, and I spoke with several NATO experts ahead of this foreign ministers meeting who are, sort of apoplectic that Russia has sent these services spraying down streets, which is not what Italy needs, and yet it's scoring all these propaganda points for them. Not helped, we might say, by the Italian government, who says, "Hey, you guys didn't help us," and they are. But yeah, there is the risk that there will be some distraction from what NATO calls its core missions. Of course, deterring an attack on Allied territory is the first, but they've also got things going on in other parts of the world. You've got the anti-ISIS fight, the counter-ISIS fight in Iraq, which has been scaled back first because of the killing of Iranian General Soleimani, which forced the mission to be suspended. And now, the risk of COVID spreading through the troops. It's been scaled back even further. So there are other forces besides just Russia who also will be looking to score points off NATO. China is a big concern. China is using the Russian playbook, I've heard many experts say, in pushing its own propaganda and disinformation. There are other concerns that, while everybody is focused on the COVID response, understandably, what if now there was a cyber attack and all of us are working completely online? What if Russia or other countries with powerful online online networks should decide to stage an attack like that. If you take a power station off for even 5 minutes right now, we're all in even more trouble than we would be otherwise. So that's something that foreign ministers did look at today, staying focused on their core missions in addition to ramping up their efforts to fight the coronavirus. Yeah,
this virus has exposed so many vulnerabilities. It's an excellent point. Teri Schultz in Brussels tonight. Teri, as always, good talking with you. Thank you.
Happier than ever to be in the studio.